We probably took a lot of heat from all our friends in the Air Force and Navy and other airplanes because it's slow, it's ugly. You know, they like to rib us about that, but the reason it was so successful in the Gulf War is that it's not really about looks or about speed, it's about firepower. And the A-10 can really deliver a lot of ordnance in a very precise manner.
The A-10 basically is a gun that they decided to make fly.
The rate of fire of our gun is around 3,900 rounds per minute, or about 50 to 70 rounds per second as the gun comes up to speed. That does not sound like a machine gun. That sounds like a very unhappy lion or tiger or beast of some sort, because it has a roaring sound.
Officially designated as the Thunderbolt II, but universally recognized as the Warthog due to its distinctive appearance, this formidable aircraft has, over the past 3 decades, earned another moniker on the battlefield, the Tank Buster.
We're not the high, sleek, fast flyer. We're the low, slow, ugly, Warthog rolling around in the mud and doing the mission.
Wow, that's awesome. It smells like victory.
Each A-10, commonly referred to as the Warthog, carries sufficient firepower to incapacitate 16 main battle tanks, solidifying its legendary status among soldiers who rely on its life-saving air support.
You can talk to troops on the ground and they love hearing that sound. It's the sound of freedom for them.
We're kind of like the insurance guy up there, or the 911 force. When they need help, they call.
In World War I, Eventually, the Air Force granted approval for the production of the A-10, deeming it well prepared to confront a specific adversary. The inaugural A-10 touched down at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Arizona in October 1975.
It's pretty awe-inspiring. It was so much bigger than the aircraft I'd flown in pilot training. It felt huge and it felt big getting into it. And it was also intimidating just because it's the first time you fly the airplane, you're by yourself, but it was definitely exhilarating at the same time.
Its single-seat cockpit featured a large bubble canopy, offering all-round vision and a bulletproof windscreen.
I love single-seat cockpit. That's one of the reasons that I was enticed by the A-10. No one looking over your shoulder, no one telling you what to do. You put the aircraft where you want to do it and you employ it in the fashion that you want to employ it. It's all personal, and you are the master.
I think the first time that was one of the things that surprised me. It took itself right off the runway for the most part. Once it hits the speed it wants to fly, it just lifts.
Then, we had nobody with combat experience except for a few of the very senior leadership that had flown in Vietnam. So a lot of people were unsure what to expect.
The A-10's
propaganda or intelligence or something.
Once recovering from the ordeal.
If I would have been flying any other fighter when I was hit by the SAM, and it was a bad hit, I'd be dead right now.
Surprisingly, the A-10 demonstrated greater versatility and survivability over enemy territory than anticipated. Throughout the 40-day conflict, the A-10 force made a formidable impact, destroying 987 tanks, 926 artillery pieces, 1,355 combat vehicles, 10 grounded fighters, and engaging 2 helicopters in air-to-air combat. The A-10, once dubbed the Air Force's Ugly Duckling, earned a new moniker, the Tank Buster. This success confounded skeptics who had questioned the necessity of a dedicated ground support aircraft. Executing an astonishing 8,500 sorties, A-10s accounted for over half of Iraq's military equipment losses in Operation Desert Storm. However, this commendable record was marred by tragic incidents of friendly fire, resulting in the unintentional death of 9 British soldiers. The A-10 had proved itself a success in Desert Storm. But for this aging aircraft to remain integral to the Air Force attack plan, it would have to meet the constraints of an ever-changing battlefield.
The A-10 got quite a few upgrades. No new engines or anything like that, but more avionics upgrades. We were able to incorporate systems that had come online, the global positioning satellite systems.
The scariest place on Earth. We really felt like you were in the middle of a combat zone, and we were.
The challenging terrain of Afghanistan made the A-10 the ideal aircraft for this battlefield, capable of navigating mountainous peaks and deep valleys while patrolling and precisely attacking targets. When Saddam Hussein's regime reached a critical juncture, this time it would take an arm with the A-10 in the front line to bring him down. March 2003, Saddam Hussein's forces were about to come head-to-head with the A-10 tank buster as it once again prepared to fly over the battlefields of Iraq. The coalition forces meant to end the regime of Saddam Hussein for good, and the Warthog had come a long way since its last desert battle.
By the time the second Gulf War, the Iraqi Freedom comes along, pretty much every airplane had been modified to improve the weapon's accuracy.
Military offensive since World War II. The assault on Baghdad.
True flying, you can feel it fly.
The A-10 means close air support at its finest. It's been my home now for 8 years, and I love it, and I hope I get to stick with it, and I hope we get the upgrades we want to take us into this next century and keep supporting the Army. But I think it's just an awesome weapons platform. It fills a specific niche, and it does it really well.
Renowned for its resilience, the A-10 would continue flying with battle damage that would incapacitate many other aircraft. In the digital battlefields of the 21st century, the humble A-10 from the 1970s emerges as a supreme force. Scheduled to remain in service until at least 2025, the A-10 Warthog has solidified itself as one of the most effective and legendary aircraft ever flown by the U.S. Air Force, earning the admiration of those involved with it.
She is not very clean when it comes to protuberances and bumps, and so she's not the sleekest looking piece of machinery that I ever designed. But she got the job done.
The 8-9 A-10 were the two entries into the AX program, which was our first foray into a fly-off. Now, prototypes were built for fixed price. I think Republic charged something like $40 million, but used a lot more than that to field two prototype A-10s. And similarly, Northrop fielded two A-9s. The first flight of our A-10 was in 16 months. So from award of contract to the first flight of our first prototype was 16 months, which is what you even could do in 1970 if it's undocumented prototype work, not a lot of paper. So these two airplanes were flown first by company pilots and then turned over to a team from the Air Force to go through a whole procedure in flight and in other logistics analyses, the whole ball of wax, to determine which one would be the winner. That was a different approach than the things that were done in the days of the other Thunder aircraft. The four aircraft, two from each company, were flown at over a period of many months at Edwards Air Force Base.
Were you present?
Oh, yes.
And so, was this a nail-biting time?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, tell me about that.
Well, the first nail-biting time is after 16 months when our chief test pilot took the airplane off, right? Sam Nelson was the pilot, and he had done simulator work. I went with Sam to Moffett Field in California, where they had a large mobile simulator where we put the characteristics of our A-10 in there, and he got practice in flying the airplane by a simulator. Well, they took it off, and that was a gear down test. We did not collapse or retract the gear. during that test and seemed to behave the way, at least in those low-speed flights, the way we intended to. So that, I think, is the first nail biter. First flights are like that,
Right. Will it fly?
Yeah. And we had an incident as the testing went on. We had 2 prototypes, right? And one of the young captains, fine man, always liked him, he landed one of our prototypes in a controlled crash. In other words, I think that he accepted the blame for judgment, and I think he blew out the tires, right? When you blow out the tires on an airplane, bad things happen, and you do some damage. But we had some really good engineers who went out and fixed that airplane, and it was back in the air in a matter of maybe weeks, see? I know that the young captain that flew it got out of the airplane and threw his helmet on the ground. He was so upset of what happened that put us at a potential disadvantage, But it's the kind of people that work for the Air Force, the kind of people that we had that let's just go fix it and go on from here. For a while, I was preliminary design manager, and I was responsible for leading our engineers and manufacturing people in design of our airplane. And it's pretty ugly. And Mr. Cartvelli, the biggest part about it that he really was unhappy with was the wing selection in terms of its thickness and camber. And that was selected in order to meet a low-speed maneuvering requirement, a sustained maneuvering requirement that about 150 knots. So Mr. Cartvelli, of course, had been working up in high Mach numbers. Speed was everything. So we had many debates, he and I, about thin wing, thick wing, and all that. We never really resolved it. However, when the contract was awarded to Republic over Northrop, hopefully that means we had a superior airplane in all things considered, and it met the requirements, but it was designed to meet the requirements. He came to me and he said, "Monsieur le Sénateur, you were right." I mean, I will never, ever forget that.
What would you say his legacy is, by any chance? What would you say?
Well, the legacy that Mr. Cartvelli would be responsible for is the entire family of aircraft, and it's substantial. Many different kinds of airplanes, developing from the technology of the 20s and the 30s right up until the 70s. And to a historian or someone who visits the museums and looks up the aircraft, his fingerprints are all over them. Republic's airplanes have been used in many different ways. Mr. Cartvelli's designs from the P-47 Thunderbolt and the Thunder series right up to Thunderbolt 2 have a linkage. And the linkage comes from all of the engineering talent that grew in that time period. People that worked on the AX or A-10 for us were there years before and learned about ground attack and close air support and how to design things. So one could see that the Thunderbolt 2 is generated out of a long history reaching back to the original Thunderbolt. From the aerodynamics work, which I did for 8-9 years, then more project work, working on the aerospace plane, on hypersonic vehicles, the F-15 project, which was our proposal, that was eventually gone to McDonnell Douglas. And of course, I was a principal on the AX competition, which pitted Northrop's A-9 against the Fairchild Republic A-10. And I spent a lot of time first as the chief technical engineer on that A-10 or AX, and then as a deputy program manager when it became a development and production, full-scale development, and went from there to senior vice president of the company dealing with technology and business administration, business development, sorry. And then was fortunate enough to be selected to become president. So that in a nutshell takes care of 35 years of involvement with Republic.
What are you most proud of?
I think the things that stay in my mind, the one thing that stays in my mind is the A-10 program, because that was bringing the company back from the grave. In 1970 dollars, it is a program that brought $5 billion, which is not much these days, but in 1970 it was a lot of money for a program that provided work, opportunity for development, and more chances to succeed. So that is the single most important impact on me and would be the most important memories I have. Summing up, I would say that the story of Republic Aviation is a great story, and that it covered the waterfront. It was a leader.
There's no doubt that if Colonel Bob Diller hadn't been there, the A-10 would have been a real failure. He saved the cannon program, basically by being a bull in a china shop. Colonel Diller, a great fighter pilot who had been one of the best fighter instructors. He was an air-to-air type, you know, silk scarf kind of guy, a brilliant tactician, had been one of the best instructors at Nellis Air Force Base's Fighter Weapons School, which was the ancestor of the Navy's Top Gun, was doing that kind of work long before the Navy ever thought of doing Top Gun. And he, peculiarly enough, and kind of against his wishes, because he really wanted to just fly airplanes and shoot down other people, right? And which, by the way, he did in the Vietnam War. He was a brilliant flight leader in the Vietnam War, one of the best. He wound up in a bureaucracy, and this was a guy who really hated bureaucracies, right at Wright-Patterson, and got himself assigned to be head of the 30-millimeter program. And beyond the shadow of a doubt, if he hadn't been there, I mean, simply no other guy could have accomplished the job that needed to be done. When Diller was handed this assignment, you're now the project manager for the cannon, they really handed him a bag of worms. He didn't know that, of course. He just stepped in and looked at it. The first thing he saw that was real obvious was the engineers had already estimated that the round would cost over $100, something like $105 a piece. If you stop and think about that, that's a deal breaker. Because if you're going to have a cannon, you have to have war reserve ammunition. You're talking about millions of rounds of ammunition. You know, if you're going to rely on a cannon, you're going to carry 20 passes worth of ammunition in every sortie. If you can't have a stockpile of weapons, of ammunition, that'll last you at least 30 days, You know, you might as well not go to war. And at $100 or $105 a round, this was hopeless. You could eat up, you know, the budget for a major fighter just buying ammunition. And he looked at it, and of course, being, you know, a total non-bureaucrat himself, he looked at it and he said, "This is hogwash." He said, "I can do it for a tenth that." And he came very close to it. He actually delivered the round, a round that everybody had told him, all the cost estimators said would cost $105 a piece. He delivered it for $13 a piece. And to do that, he had to trample over every ordnance bureaucracy in the Air Force. I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing. But he turned out to have a natural knack for production engineering, and he knew how to pick people who were great production engineers. The packaging was a huge amount of the cost. The brass case was a huge amount. He innovated aluminum cases to save money. He just saved nickels and dimes everywhere. All of them violating some military specification and some bureaucrat behind that military specification. He went through them like the Mongol army. Not only did he do that, but being naturally suspicious of, you know, purely theoretical engineering, he said, we've got to test it every step of the way. And the Air Force was prepared at that point to simply, you know, fire the gun a lot on the ground, which is traditionally what, you know, Army and Air Force gun guys do. And if it fired pretty well, fine, it's qualified to go fly with the airplane. It'll be fine. Bilger didn't believe that. He believed, very rightly, that the things that happen when you fire an airplane off an airplane that are not the same as firing it off a cast iron mount, you know, at Fort Huachuca or something. So he demanded airborne tests. And furthermore, he wasn't really sure that we were right about how lethal this thing was. I mean, we'd done a fair amount of ground firing at pieces of armor and even at armor with gas cans behind it and stuff like that. But that's not the same as firing at the real deal. So he devised a program under a wonderful cover name. It was called the LAVP, the Lot Ammunition Verification Program, which was to fly real A-10s with real cannons and real ammunition and shoot them at real Soviet tanks. And he scoured up money out of the most improbable places. He got a lot of stuff for free just by kind of horse trading. You know, this is the kind of thing that fighter pilots and fighter maintenance people are really good at, is, you know, this kind of black market kind of wheeling and dealing. He found somebody in the intelligence community who was importing tanks, you know, Soviet tanks under very high classification because nobody wanted to reveal who we were buying them from. But there were various satellite nations who had Soviet tanks and who, you know, would have a general that could be bribed and you could buy some tanks from him, right? And it turned out this organization was so effective that they were getting far more tanks than anybody needed, right? They didn't know what to do with them. And somehow he wangled an authorization, probably illegally, to get a bunch of these tanks. And then he got a bunch of cast-off M48 Army tanks that they no longer wanted. He assembled the 5th largest tank army in the world. He had close to 400 tanks out in the desert in Nevada. He'd even wangled some Marine maintenance battalion. Somehow he got next to them to fix his tanks, because he said these tanks have to be loaded with ammunition, they have to have fuel in them, they have to have oil in them, and they have to have engines that can run, right? Otherwise they're not real targets because of the issue of fire. Fire is so important. You fire at some dead tank, you don't know whether you're going to light it on fire or not, right? So out in the desert, outside Nellis Air Force Base, he assembled the 5th largest tank army in the world for live A-10s to come in and shoot at. We learned so much from that program. The first thing we learned was that if we had sent the cannon to combat with this approved ammunition and everything, it would have failed the first day of combat, because there were some real problems with, first of all, the gun gases were in fact obscuring the vision of the pilot. Secondly, they were causing the engine to fail. There's such huge gun gas being developed out at the muzzle that was blowing straight back into the engines behind the cockpit. They were actually causing engines to shut down, to have compressor stalls and all this kind of thing. But once you had made your live firing passes, the very first ones, the problems were real obvious. He got on it. He changed the formulation of the propellant a little to reduce the smoke. They got a different deflector for the muzzle gases so that the gases wouldn't go into the engine. And thank God we're able to solve those problems, but only because we'd had that fifth largest tank army to shoot at. And by the way, he installed cameras inside the tank so you could see the inside effects. They counted up kills very meticulously, and by the way, fixed the tanks again and shot at them again. And we found out the cannon was devastatingly lethal, much more lethal than any anti-tank weapon available up to that time, much more lethal than the computer models had predicted, because the fire was so devastating. And we were getting like tank kills of well over 60% per pass, which was astonishing. The upshot was that this really brilliant, mostly illegal, terrifically opposed program saved the whole A-10. And by the way, its after effects still exists today, because out of that, the military reform movement of which I was a part realized the importance of live fire testing, of testing at real targets with real ammunition. And that became legislated as part of the operational test legislation that created the Office of the Operational Test and Evaluation Director, who exists to this day, who oversees all that. He has a special responsibility in the legislation for seeing that every vehicle, platform, ship, airplane that carries American military people is tested with live enemy ammunition to make sure the people inside can survive. If it wasn't for Dilger's stolen tank army, the entire A-10 program would have been a failure, and we would have never had the live fire testing that we have today demanded by the Congress.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth, and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the Dronescapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.